nice enough to bring the water and breads tonight. Thank you for that.
Got to do something nice to get to read here, you know.
Yeah, you hear that? People,
Yeah. Okay. Most of you know me as a poet. Tonight we're going to do some flash fiction. Most of you know that one of my topics, recurring topics, is the end of the world. So we got 3 end of the world flashes here. Different ends of the world. The foreign film. We walked from the campus to where the only movie theater for 30 miles rested in a curve of the highway. A Belmondo film was showing, and this was our first date. There was nothing romantic about the afternoon. The sky was dirty gray with coming snow. The snow already on the curbside ground was dirty gray from coal smoke and passing trucks. Our talk was of classes and professors, the business of being students, rather than a future or favorite songs. I was surprised when she put her arm through mine. That simple touch electrified my body and drove the cold out of my bones. I paid for the tickets despite her protest. The impoverished rebel in leather-patched jeans, oversized fisherman's sweater, and worn-out boots, I still intended to be the gentleman. She favored me to my toes with a smile as I helped her out of her coat. As the movie began, I put my arm around her. The image of softness beneath her pullover made it hard to follow the action on the screen. She leaned against me. My free hand rested on hers in her lap. Her head was on my shoulder and her scent in my heart. I was content to live in that moment, and if asked to speak, I could only have purred. After the movie ended and after the unexpected sun on the snow left me as blind as having her next to me did, we headed back. I steered us toward the bus station and its diner. Coffee and club sandwiches for 2 formed a wall across the table, allowing us to talk instead of touch. We could spend time together over Christmas break. Our homes weren't that far apart. The city was convenient, and at some point we touched hands and the ability to talk just completely left me. The snow came as we arrived at her dorm. In the commons room, we settled on a couch. I forgot about the world beyond her lips and the press of her body to mine. There was a moment when we touched hands again and a spark actually jumped between our fingers. Evening settled in. She hugged me in the doorway, steeling me for the storm outside. We were happening too fast, she suddenly said. She needed to back up and figure out where she was going, and this was our last date. The end of the world. Yeah, exactly. And it is an apocalypse, you know, and the apocalypse always leaves us alone. End of day. Little bit of backstory to this. I was moderating a writers group back at the beginning of the century, and one of the prompts was a photograph of a cowboy, his horse, and a campfire. And I challenged everybody to do a story on that, and I ended up doing 2. The first one was breaking all the rules, nothing but dialogue. That's all it was. And the second one has no dialogue at all. End of day. Pink fringed the horizon. He recalled how her cheeks turned that color when he first saw him. When she first kissed him, came to his bed and accepted his caress. All this seemed so long ago. He felt like he'd been running forever. The clouds turned orange as the sun slipped lower and the day grew older. Newborn orange, he thought, as he remembered the small orchard down the hill from their cabin. As a child, he'd been impatient. Knowing the fully ripened fruit would taste best, it was still a painful, terrible itch to wait for the colors to work their way through time. Bitter fruit, best thrown away, suddenly seemed a fit description for his life. And then the sun was gone, the sky catching fire at its last touch. Reds and purples eclipsed the puny man-made thing his food cooked on. Oh, for a mouth filled with fresh-cut strawberries, for a nose and a spoon with blueberries and cream. She'd painted her lips that red for him, worn satin that royal shade when they went to the city. He could taste her lips in the sunset, smell the powder and clean skin that waited for him beneath the dress. These were things to be remembered but never regained. His mouth tingled at these memories, then burned with bile as he thought of yesterday morning. The explosion of his shotgun, the explosion when it fired, was the colors that leaped from the barrel. If yellow was the color of the morning sun, then this sunset was the sound and smell of a bank guard's death. The colors faded. They evaporated like the hours he had left. Tomorrow the posse would take him. He hoped they would be kind to his horse. And last but not least, we're good on time? Oh, sorry, okay. I wrote a couple of things for a British magazine called Ethereal Tales. And when Elizabeth announced that she was closing up shop with one last issue to do, she asked me if I would write the closing piece for it, something about endings. I might have gone a little bit overboard. A description of the end of days. It starts with the end of the world. Fitzgerald's life and mind are in a post-apocalyptic shambles. The germ weapon surprise we called the Crazies has killed most of his kin at unexpected moments. His friends and many of his blacksmith shop's customers with equal randomness, and continues going about its work 10 years after setting out. Being spared so far by the Crazies, and therefore being sane by comparison to people who died violently insane, Fitzgerald does his best to cope, to have a reasonable routine and a rational reason to go on living. Each morning he dresses the way a cowboy would dress if he were a peer of Roy Rogers or Gene Autry in the Saturday westerns of his childhood. He wears newish-looking cowboy boots, of course, and spurs that never fail to jingle, jangle, and jingle once more. His jeans are neither baggy nor tight, so the women of his younger days could admire him and still decide without undue pressure if they lusted after him as well. Were they still alive? The checked shirt is long-sleeved and is buttoned all the way to the neck and at the cuffs. The heroes of childhood would never be seen with their cuffs rolled up. A neatly folded bandana is wrapped around his neck, and a light-colored cowboy hat is tipped slightly forward to keep the sun out of his eyes. These are clean clothes, and would be even if he had just traded blows mano-a-mano with Black Bart on a terribly dusty trail. Some days he'll walk down the road out of the hills to the ramshackle community that was once an old suburb and someday might become a village again. He barters for what he needs, using the coin of work done or to come at his forge and stable for things he can use. Other days, he and the dogs hunt for fresh game. The dogs seem to like him well enough after all these years, and always listen closely when he talks to them around the cabin. Still other days, he leans back in a chair, props his feet up on the porch rail, and contemplates the lack of peace that created the peace around him. Evenings after dinner are unvarying, except for once a few years back when he took sick with a fever that kept him in bed for nearly a week of fervent hoping to die. With the dishes done, the dogs fed, and the cats set mousing, he sips some whiskey watered with tears. For him, the world didn't end until his wife of over 50 years died. He doesn't know for sure she's dead, but it's been 7 years since she came home. Nobody's found her. They haven't seen her. So it's almost a fact the Crazies got her in the deep woods and she crawled off to die. He has a drink because he remembers her. He cries because he has only memories. Whiskey and tears finished, he yields for a while to those shambles. Taking his wife's soul in his arms, he dances a simple two-step around the living room. No great singer, he sings nevertheless, First Johnny Mercer's I Remember You, then Skeeter Davis, The End of the World. And the world ends with an old cowboy falling asleep, cat-like in the afternoon sun. Sitting on the porch, he dreams about a yellow caddy ragtop with high tail fins, roaring as it once did along the pre-apocalyptic surface of the weed-taken County 2 lane in front of his porch. He dreams about leaping on its almost infinitely long hood like a cowboy of his childhood would ride a just-caught Mustang, and of those bright red liquid flowers suddenly spreading across its hood and up the towering slope of its windshield. Thank you. And thank you for the time.